A year in review. A Bob in review. 2023 in Bob review. A Bob 23 Bob view. I have no idea what I'm going to call this video. It's 2024. This video is late. Of course it's late. I was smart and took a break over the holidays. But here we are. I'm gonna go over every game I made a video on and sum up my thoughts real quick. Feel free to check out the full videos for deeper thoughts, of course. And to make it extra spicy, I'm going to give everything a rating. This is the rating system I've come up with. I call it the Bob Score. The Bob Score is a number composed of the following subgrades. First, the positive grades, from 0 to 10. Style and presentation. How cool is the game? What are the vibes like? How good does it look and sound, both technically and aesthetically? A 0 means it stinks. A 10 means it's cool as heck. Next grade, breadth and depth. How much is there to the game? How many levels or worlds? What's the replay value, and how deep do the mechanics go? A 0 means it's over real quick. A 10 means it can go all night long. Then the negative grades. These go from 0 to -10. Frustration factor. How annoying is the game to play? How much does it make you grind your teeth or make you want to smash your controller? A 0 means it's not frustrating, maybe even pleasant. A -10 means I need to hold a puppy after playing it to get through the rest of my day. And finally, psychic damage. How wrong is the game? To what extent is it damaging to the human mind or to culture at large? A 0 means no objections. A -10 means the creators might be guilty of crimes against humanity. The final Bob Score is the sum of these grades. Let's use a game I haven't made a video on as an example. The Spice Girls game. Or Spice? Or Spice World? The game's title is unclear. This game would have been a great disappointment to even the most passionate Spice Girls fan in 1990 whenever it came out. Why? There's some Spice Girls music, yes, but the character models are grotesque, the menus are frustrating, and there's not much else to the game. A solid 3. There's very little content. You can remix songs, kinda. You can program some dance moves, kinda. And that's it. Incredibly disappointing. There are bonus behind-the-scenes movie clips, including a surprise cameo by one Nelson Mandela. I guess that bumps it up all the way to a 2. What little game there is plays as it should, I guess. It's a mildly interactive basic music remixer. But for a Spice Girls fan product, it's breathtakingly low on content. And for that alone, it gets a -6. I'm not gonna sit here and say there's no room in the world for a Spice Girls game. If Journey gets one, if Michael Jackson gets one, the Spice Girls can get one. But anything explicitly British will automatically get a high psychic damage grade, and the character models don't help. -7. So, the Bob Score for Spice Girls the video game world totals to a -8. Should feel lucky, quite frankly. Anyway, that's how the rest of this video will be structured. The maximum score is 20. The minimum is -20. These are not so much ratings of the game's quality as they are ratings of me coming up with a novel rating system for funsies. I hope this is acceptable to you, and if it isn't, I don't know, deal with it. Let's go! Helicops. My very first. It will always have a place in my heart. This is where it all started. A game from my childhood that I dug back up and inspected with near academic precision. It's not great, but for these reasons, I will continue to have a soft spot for it. Still contains the greatest animated intro in the history of video games, maybe the history of media in general, but it sets an incredibly high bar that the rest of the game struggles to live up to. The game itself looks and sounds okay. Let's call it a 7, carried entirely by that intro.
But all that is past. It is now the year 2015, and Neo Tokyo is in jeopardy once again.
Lots of levels, lots of variety between them, different helicopters to play with that all have different strengths and weaknesses, lots of weapons and enemy types. Yeah, that's an 8. Not that high. Limited lives and difficulty level are kind of annoying, but cheats can mitigate this. The most annoying thing about it is the sound effects. -1. None. It's a weird, fun curiosity of a game, a relic of a time past, but it doesn't harm anyone. I'd give it a positive score for this if I could, again, just because of how incredible that intro is. 0. Final Bob score for Helicops, 14. Starwinder, the ultimate space race. Ah, a streaming discovery. I can never resist a racing game with a story. There's a charm to this one that just captured me. A vision. Don't play it, it sucks. Watch the video though. The game itself is an ugly mess of brown pixels stuck in low poly tubes with grating sound effects and music you can barely hear. The CG cutscenes aren't great from a technical perspective, but they are hilarious, sometimes even intentionally, and you can't help but want to keep playing to see all of them. A 4. This is a good example of a broad but shallow game. There's lots of tracks, but very little variety between them. There's all kinds of weapons to use, and you'll be pressing the shoot button until you run out of ammo and automatically move to the next one. There's plenty of competitors to race against, but every race feels the same. This will get a 3. A low frustration factor for Starwinder, it's not a difficult game at all. In fact, if anything, it could use more challenge. -1. This is a little tricky. The animation can be a bit bizarre at times. This is a game that will in some ways put a smile on your face, but in other ways make you ask questions. -3. Starwinder's final Bob score is a 3. Don't hold it against it though. The X-Files game. The game that changed everything for me, because it made me believe that I could make shorter videos with quick impressions. It wasn't a good impression, but I needed to express it so hard that I streamlined my entire production process, and the Flash Bob series was born. A 90s FMV adventure game is the perfect vessel for an interactive X-Files experience, and while the lack of Scully and Mulder as protagonists is evident, at least they're here. It hits all the notes it needs to hit. 8. You get to use a computer as a computer and you have a Zoom call with the lone gunman. You can't expect more from an FMV point and click. That's a big ol' 6. Aside from the game's protagonist being Blandy McBlandface, the game's biggest problem is that navigating the environments is super confusing. Let's go with a -5. Adventure game Moon Logic, what more do I need to say? -5. The X-Files game gets a total Bob score of 4, but that doesn't take away the fact that I really want one of those beautiful big box copies. Chibi Robo, my arch nemesis, my curse, the cute GameCube underrated classic that everyone loves so much because they probably haven't actually played it. Let's get into it. The graphics are cute and colorful, but the sound and music is beyond irritating. I'm going to be fair and give it a 5. Yeah, there's plenty of game here. This is not a judgment on whether that's good or bad. 7. This is actually a good example of the difference between frustration factor and psychic damage. Frustration factor is no skippable dialogue, slow and clunky interface, and having to traverse long distances and lots of obstacles with shitty controls. That's a -8. Psychic damage is having to watch these animations over and over and over. Being a little guy in a big house is a fantastic idea, but these character designs are not. Having to hear all the terribly dissonant footstep sounds is not. -9. Chibi Robo gets a Bob score of -5. I wish I could give it worse, but there are rules. Entirely arbitrary rules that I made up myself, but rules nonetheless. Titanic, Adventure Out of Time. Another barely remembered game from my youth. Travel back in time to a fateful night in 1912 on the Atlantic, and spend it exploring a ship that I'm sure will be just fine as you uncover several intertwined spy plots and also maybe break up a marriage or two. The CG backgrounds may look a little dated, but it's obvious that the Titanic was recreated with love and care. The not quite FMV character animations are sublime, and is a style I'd love to see get a resurgence. Music is good too. What's that sound like? Sounds like a 9. Several endings, multiple paths to those endings, optional quests, a casual explore the ship mode, more than you'd ever want from a simple adventure game. That's an 8. The interface is a little clunky and there's a time limit at the end due to an unfortunate incident with an iceberg, but otherwise it's smooth sailing. -1. There's some questionable politics at the very end, but it's overall a very pleasant experience. 0 psychic damage. All this gives Titanic Adventure Out of Time a Bob score of 16. Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie Gamers Edition. Here's another one of those games that people remember fondly because they've probably never played it for more than 10 minutes. A lot of good ideas in this one, few of which are well executed. Let's get this over with. In some ways, you can tell a lot of budget has been put into this game, and in other ways, it's a brown and gray smear that looks the same wherever you are. The points it gets are solely for the at the time forward-thinking attempt of having a minimal HUD. 4. It's an exceptionally linear game. You're very limited in what weapons the level gives you, it gets boring real quick, and there's not enough plot to keep you moving forward. 3. I'll say this is inflated by it having been long lauded as a classic, when it is in fact boring and mediocre. To the game's credit, the HUD-less interactions don't cause too much trouble. They're just stuck in an otherwise bad game. Playing the Gamer's Edition means there's a few extra bugs, but none of them were funny. -3. Here too, the grade isn't entirely the game's fault, but it's based on a film I hate with a burning passion. That's the way she goes. -7. Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie Gamer's Edition, will forever be stamped with a Bob score of -3. Barbie Horse Adventures Wild Horse Rescue. Look, finding bad games to play for entertainment, licensed or otherwise, is one thing. But then being surprised that the game is actually good? Love it. That's what it's all about. A hidden treasure. Loveliness, kindness, and sweetness exude from every divot stamped into the disc. The graphics are fine, sure, but the vibe of the game is just so goddamn wholesome and pleasant. I'm giving it a 9. There's no reason to expect a Barbie horse game to have a lot of depth, and yet here we are. A large amount of very distinct environments, various activities within them, reasons to replay, motivation to keep on going. How is this game so good? Why is this game so good? I don't have answers to those questions, but it's getting another 9. Nothing. No frustrations. A 0. On the one hand, it's still a branded product of late capitalism whose function it is to reinforce binary gender roles and sell toys, but on the other hand, it makes you feel real nice and good on a pretty deep and fundamental level. So it's a lot like the Barbie movie in that regard. Another 0. Could you tell that I really liked Wild Horse Rescue? Well, if you weren't sure yet, it gets a record-shattering Bob score of 18. Frank Herbert's Dune, not to be confused with the highly regarded real-time strategy games. This adaptation of the sci-fi fantasy classic, ostensibly based on the 2000 miniseries, was pooped out by French purveyors of quality Cryo Interactive. I didn't do a full video on it because I couldn't get through the entire game. Maybe if I hit 20 patrons? The game is a mess both technically and stylistically. The voice acting is terrible and the lip sync even worse. The designs for all environments and characters are just awful. 2. I'll be fair on the game, there seems to be plenty of it. Levels are big, there's different weapons and stuff. The problem is, more of this game is not a good thing for your psyche. Balance it out to a 5. Oof, doesn't feel good. Couldn't get the PC version to run right, even though I'm kind of an expert on doing that. It's too bad because that version misspells Frank Herbert's name on the main menu. The PS2 version runs super slow for some reason. Should be no surprise that the game feels awful to play on pretty much every level. -5. This game is representative of a particular kind of garbage that I've seen come out of French developers. The visual design is disgusting in a way that is very fitting for how awful the entire experience is. -7. Fear may be the mind killer, but Frank Herbert's Dune the video game is something far, far worse. Total Bob score? -5. Superman 64, an all-time classic. The worst game ever made? Maybe. I played this as a stream donation goal, and really, there should be no other reason to ever touch this. Oof. A 1. I mean, there are a lot of levels. There are also a lot of rings to fly through. A lot of rings. It gets a 3. It's quite possible that you've only seen footage of the game. Playing it is a different experience altogether. It lives up to its reputation. -5. This is tough actually. You go in expecting the worst thing ever. Expectations couldn't be lower. And I'll be honest, it wasn't worse than that. I guess it's because I went in prepared. Because of that, and this might shock you, it gets a 0. Superman 64, which technically isn't actually called Superman 64, look it up, was rushed into an early release by a publisher that I'm sure went on to massive success. But as for its Bob score, that's a -1. Need for Speed High Stakes on the PC, from back in the day when the Need for Speed games had a singular identity. Exotic supercars on wide open roads, chased by cops. It was thought that Need for Speed Hot Pursuit couldn't be topped. It was thought wrong, baby. The music is a bit of a downgrade from the previous game, but you can't deny the visual upgrade. My mind is still blown away by the 3D interiors. A nice 8. A whole lot of cars to race, a whole lot of tracks to race him on, including the Hot Pursuit tracks, and an in-depth career mode, and even technically an active online multiplayer scene if you can find the right fan patch. This is a lot of game. 8. One big frustrating thing. The tracks are really long, which isn't bad on its own, but some races in the career mode ask you to do way too many laps. I've got Omega tier ADHD. I don't want to be racing on the same track for 20 minutes. That gives it a -2. This is just a plain racing game. There's nothing to damage the psyche here. I'd like to one day do a comparison with the PlayStation version of the game, which is different enough to have its very own pros and cons. Until then, the PC version gets a Bob score of 14. Big Rigs Over the Road Racing. Here's another worst game ever that I had to see with my own eyeballs. We all make mistakes. It has no style. It has no grace. I guess technically of all the things that are broken in this game, this is some of the least, and yet a 2. Okay, so I think the game is supposed to have 4 trucks and 4 tracks, but also the menus lie? There's less to the game than it claims, and none of it works as it should anyway. I'm giving it a 1. What's so frustrating about buildings and objects not having collision? About the physics not existing? I played the updated version where the other racer actually drives, and still that brings us to a -5. Okay, hear me out. Obviously the fact that anyone thought this game was ready to be stamped onto a disc is ludicrous. Its very existence is an error in the universe. And yet, just like with Superman, going in with an understanding of what it is mitigates a lot. Also, going backwards and seeing how fast I could go is one of the most joyful experiences of my life. So I can't give it more or less than a -2. Imagine an absolute best case scenario where all the game's bugs were fixed and everything worked as designed. It would still be an awful piece of crap. Maybe less hilarious though. That's a -4 Bob score for Big Rigs Over the Road Racing. Secret Agent Barbie. Barbie Horse Adventures Wild Horse Rescue got me hyped. Barbie games can be good, great even. Will I strike gold again? It's a rough looking game. It's a rough sounding game. But these scene transitions are top tier. It's the only thing top tier about Secret Agent Barbie, and yet it helps it get to a score of 3. It's a pretty linear game, but there is some variety in gameplay and levels, I guess. A 5. It's rough looking, rough sounding, yes, but also very rough playing. It kind of comes across like you're playing an early 3D game on a 2006 Java phone. For you kids out there, that means not great. -3. Judging games made for children is difficult, but very necessary. For the bit, this one is technically safe for children, so -3. Secret Agent Barbie grapple hooks itself to a Bob score of 2. Detective Barbie and the Carnival Caper. Barbie Horse Adventures Wild Horse Rescue got me hyped. Barbie games can be good, great even. Will I strike gold again? This game is very colorful, too colorful, dangerously colorful. The sprite scaling is awkward and jarring, but song with vocals.
Bumper cars and shooting stars, Ferris wheel by the sea.
That will bump it up to a 4. It's a very basic point-and-click adventure game that's given depth only because everything is random. I'm being generous by giving it a 2. Everything is random. Everything is random. Everything is There is no rhyme or reason to solving anything, and it's the definition of frustrating. Also, Barb walks really, really slowly. -9. Check out this face. -5. Detective Barbie in the Carnival Caper couldn't solve its way out of a Bob score of -8. Detective Barbie 2, The Vacation Mystery. Barbie Horse Adventures Wild Horse Rescue got me hyped. Barbie games can be good, great even. Will I strike gold again? Environments are less garish than the first Detective Barbie, but Barbie's outfit is worse. That would equalize the grade, but there is also this song that plays when you install the game.
If there's a mystery you can solve, and clues are hard to
Which bumps it up all the way to a 6. It's essentially the same as the first game, but not quite as random. Or at least the randomization is a little more structured. A 3. Because it's not random in the same way, the frustration factor goes way down. I was actually able to finish this one and solve the crime. Barb is still a slow walker. -4. It's all relative, isn't it? DB2 wasn't enjoyable, but compared to the first one, it's an absolute treasure. It still gets a -3 just by association. Detective Barbie 2, The Vacation Mystery hang glides its way to a Bob score of 2. Sand Warriors, The Battle for the Sun Throne. Another game from my childhood that I had vague memories of, and made a deep dive video on because I saw nothing comparable on YouTube even 25 years after its release. Still very proud of that. It deserves to be remembered. The CG cutscenes are pretty bad but still have a charm. The music isn't great unless you can get the Red Book audio to work, and the graphics aren't particularly stylish, but they are technically impressive for the time. It gets a 5. Linear mission progression, no real upgrading to speak of, but a variety of very wide open levels and mission objectives, and lots of weapons to shoot baddies with. It's just a well-designed game. 8. It's tricky to get running, I guess. It's also not an easy game, but you have infinite lives, so you can just get good. A low FF of -2. None to speak of, really. I guess that means a 0. Sand Warriors, The Battle for the Sun Throne, insert ancient Egypt pun here, its way to a Bob score of 11. Running High, another stream discovery, a life-changing event. A Japan-exclusive sci-fi running game with charm coming out of its exhaust ports. Just getting out of the way that it's a 10, because it's a 10. The environment and character designs, the interface, the hints at its backstory, it's all just great. But the music is incredible. Did I mention it gets a 10? It does. It gets a 10. A lot of characters to choose from that all race differently, including some bizarre bonus characters, but only a few tracks and no tournament or career mode, and no multiplayer to speak of. I want there to be more of this game, but it's lacking. 4. Okay, so the actual racing itself doesn't feel great. The combat mechanics, which I'm generally not a fan of in futuristic racers anyway, don't really gel. A -3, and I'm so sorry. The game's vibe gives the opposite of psychic damage. They should prescribe this game as therapy, or at least the soundtrack. I'd love to give it a positive number, but I'm going to stick to my arbitrary and made-up rules and just give it a 0. Running High recklessly sprints itself to a Bob score of 11. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The Fallen. The best Star Trek show gets a great but forgotten third-person shooter. Somebody get this ported to modern systems. It's not strictly speaking a great looking game, but that early Unreal Engine hits me right in the nostalgia. The DS9 style is carried over well, including all the Star Trek interfacey stuff. Most of the actors return and you get to explore the promenade in between every level. A Deep Space 8 for Deep Space Nine. 3 characters with their own unique gameplay styles and full-length campaigns, a ton of levels in very different environments, lots of objectives and enemies, plenty of weapons and tools to play around with. That's content, baby. They call it Deep Space Nine for a reason. I'm giving it a 9 is what I mean. If anything, there might be too much content. The 3 campaigns aren't distinct enough to justify their lengths. -2. Memories of DS9 give me nothing but joy, but I'm still giving it a -2 for these faces. Star Trek Deep Space Nine The Fallen gets a Bajoran 68, which translates to a Bob score of 13. The X-Files Resist or Serve, the other X-Files game, this time a survival horror game for the PS2. Do you want to believe? Do you trust anyone? Do you remember the other X-Files catchphrase? Dana and Fox are here, as are the Lone Gunman and Super Nintendo Skinner. The menus are kinda slick, the environments and character models look okay, but the animations are atrocious. Real bottom of the barrel stuff, giving it a 3. 2 similar but technically distinct campaigns playing as either Mulder or Scully, and they're pretty long, lots of unlockable behind the scenes content. In the end, it plays like what it is, a mediocre at best survival horror pastiche. 5. X-Files fans are used to crushing disappointment, but even with low expectations, the worst part of the game is that it's just boring and bland and you want it to end. I guess that means I'll give it a -5. Because the game doesn't really inspire any emotion at all, it doesn't do much psychic damage either. There aren't even that many laughs. A -2. The truth is out there for the X-Files Resist or Serve. That truth is a Bob score of 1. Airblade, a story-based hoverboarder from the makers of the Burnout series. High concept, but not a good game. Ugly brown environments, chunky character designs that lack any charm, bad music, and overall it comes across as very cheap. It therefore gets a 2. There's not much to it. The levels are like medium-sized. You follow all goals linearly, so there's no incentive to explore, and doing tricks almost never matters. Another 2. Okay, so you get a single timer that you need to complete all mission objectives within. That means if you mess up an early objective repeatedly, you simply have no time left to complete the first. That sucks, and the rest of the game isn't much better. -7. Honestly, another game that's too bland to cause any damage.
-1.
Airblade clumsily kickflips its way to a Bob score of -4. Dark Summit, an objective-based snowboarding game with a story? Sounds right up my alley, and yet... The thing about Dark Summit is I don't know if it wants to be edgy and, well, dark, or cartoony and goofy. I don't think the game knows either. More than anything, the game's presentation just leaves me puzzled. It gets a 3. I won't deny that there's a lot to do in the game. Doing it isn't fun at all, but there's a lot. Score challenges, trick challenges, platforming challenges, collectibles, unlockables, etc, etc. I guess I'll begrudgingly give it a 6. Everything feels fine until you're in the air. It's a snowboarding game. You're gonna be spending a lot of time in the air. It's like every time you jump, the game fills the internals of your controller with some kind of thick slime. No good. -5. The game has its charm, I have to admit. For better or worse, there's nothing like it. Just a -2. Dark Summit crashes headfirst into a tree to get a Bob score of 2. Barbie Horse Adventures Riding Camp. Barbie Horse Adventures Wild Horse Rescue got me hyped. Barbie games can be good, great even. Will I strike gold again? This game came out in 2008, and the Wii and PS2 were capable of much better at that point. The environment is a bland height map with some buildings and trees on it, and the interface is bare bones. It gets a few points for using a phone as a menu though, which is always cute, and also for having plenty of outfit options. Let's give it a 4? It's open world Barbie horse action, and yet there's not much to it. It all feels incredibly shallow. A 3. I'll admit this game loses points for the comparison to Wild Horse Rescue. Good. It deserves to lose those points. They could have just made Wild Horse Rescue 2. Open world Wild Horse Rescue. Oh my god, that would be so good! For giving me that thought and not living up to it, it gets a -8. I mean, as a Barbie game, it's innocent enough. Oh, the PS2 version is a very obvious Wii port, and because of that, the controls are all messed up. Let's go with a -4. Barbie Horse Adventures Riding Camp gets a Blue Ribbon Bob score of -5. Eggs of Steel, Charlie's Excellent Adventure. Oh boy, a visual effects studio decided to make a video game. Well, you would at least expect it to look good, right? Fucking hell. It's got no style. I wish it had no presentation. At the very best, the levels look plain, and at worst they are obscene monstrosities that may require special containment protocols. Speaking of obscene monstrosities, I had to witness this cutscene, so now you do too. I'm giving it a 1 because I can tell some work was put into it. It shouldn't have been though. Okay, so on paper it's a fairly long puzzle platformer with lots of levels and gameplay variety. By this metric, I'm forced to at least give it a 6. Would it surprise you that these first-time game makers made a game that didn't feel very good to play? Other than the presentation, that's really the game's biggest problem. Awkward camera angles and awkward controls do not a fun puzzle platformer make. Boss battles are confusing messes too. -7. This should not exist. It's an abomination. Everyone involved should have known better. This is a monkey's paw game. It's a game that is the cruel result of a demonic pact, a Faustian bargain that we are all the victims of. When the aliens invite us to the Galactic Federation, this is one of the things that we need to keep hidden, lest they annihilate us for our crimes. -10. Eggs of Steel, Charlie's Excellent Adventure scrambles its way to a Bob score of -10. The Mummy Returns. Let's wrap this list up with Brendan Fraser's chiseled good looks in this cheap movie tie-in. So the game looks okay, but there's zero facial animations, and even worse, no clips from the movie at all and no CG cutscenes to replace them. Just long text crawls. That's not very stylish, guys, and results in a 3. You get 2 different campaigns as either the hero or the villain, which is a fun twist. Yes, there's a lot of asset reuse, but they play differently enough. Even so, the basic gameplay is rather bland. A 6. There's something about how simplistic this game is that keeps the frustration kind of low until you get to the jungle village level and you have to take it up against these goddamn pygmies, and I kept dying and dying and dying and I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. Anyway, -4. There's a lot that is silly and bad about this game, but I have a weird respect for it. It's not a work of art, it is entirely a commercial product, but it knows what it is. No psychic damage, but probably best to take a break between playthroughs for your mental well-being anyway. 0. The Mummy Returns opens its jaw wide to receive a Bob score of 5. And we have reached the end. 2023 has been a pretty great year for me. I completed a sorely needed therapy trajectory, I started running, I returned to my ancestral homeland for the first time in 15 years, and clearly all of this has paid off by me being more productive than I have ever been, as you can tell by all these wonderful videos. So what's up for 2024? Some small changes. The last few months I've settled into a weekly release schedule, but I'm gonna slow that down a bit so I can give myself more time to make my videos as good as I reasonably can. I might also experiment with new things as I continue to find my voice. I'm having a great time, really, and I want to keep that up. That means I'm going to have to be a bit more judicious about which games I end up making videos for, but fear not, more total garbage and forgotten gems are coming. Follow me on Twitch to get the raw feed and first impressions of everything I play, and join my Patreon to buy influence in what ends up getting a video, probably. Also a Discord, you know where to find the links. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little wrap-up. Here's the full list. What's your favorite? Which do you hate the most? Do you disagree with any of my ratings? More comment bait like that. What games do you want me to check out in 2024? It should be an exciting year. I have more experience now, I'm going to try new things, I'm going to fail, and I'm going to try again. It's gonna be a hell of a ride, and I'm happy to have you in my little sidecar as we careen down this hill at breakneck speed. Thanks for watching, bye!